Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Today is the disappearance day of Jayananda Prabhu, who I never personally met, at least I don't remember doing so. No, it wouldn't have been, because he passed away in America and I was in the other side of the world. I'm going to speak about him, praying for his mercy to do so. Mostly from a book called Jayananda Thakur by Vishoka Prabhu, another of our God brothers who had significant association with him, and also from Vyasaki Prabhu's book, Radha Damodar Vilas, which he compiled, starting off with the idea to, please don't take photos, please just listen. Starting with the idea to have a biography of Vishnujan Swami. And in the course of collecting anecdotes and information about Vishnujan Swami, he found so many devotees would speak about Jayananda Prabhu that he was thinking, well, I should write something about him also. So that book, Radha Damodar Vilas, is mostly about Vishnujan Swami, about Radha Damodar, devotees serving Radha Damodar. And there's a lot also about Jayananda Prabhu, who passed away on May the 1st, 1977. He was just turned 38 years, completed 38 years, 4 days after his 38th birthday. He passed away in his quarters in New Dwarka, Los Angeles. It was expected that he would pass away because he had leukemia and he wasn't trying to fight it. He just prepared himself for passing away by being in New Dwarka and to be there with all the devotees. He was a California boy by external vision. He joined the San Francisco Radha Krishna Temple early in 1967. It was called Radha Krishna Temple. There weren't deities of Radha and Krishna there at the time. It had just been opened, and Srila Prabhupada had just founded ISKCON in New York City. He was different to the other devotees living there from the beginning in various ways. Most strikingly, in the beginning, was that he used to come and visit the temple, and he wasn't a hippie. So he stood out by wearing ordinary civilian clothes. Nowadays it would be difficult to say what ordinary means, but what in those days, well, even now you could say standard, respectable clothes, like the kind of thing you wear in the university, I guess. Yeah. If you went in dressed as a hippie, it would not be much appreciated. Or even if you went in dressed like you're dressed now, it wouldn't be much appreciated. And he had a crew cut. You know what that means? Crew cut. Means, yeah, Americans know. Means short, very short hair. Like in the army, it's quite common like that. And he was 28 years old, which was quite older than most of the devotees who were joining. And he wasn't wild, he wasn't crazy, he wasn't even pretending to be wild and crazy, he didn't take drugs. He was very different. He was looking for that which he had been looking for all his life. At the age of 4 years old, he was in a church. He was brought to church. There's an anecdote. Some of his relatives also told anecdotes about him upon learning that he was a great Vaishnava saint. So at the age of 4 years old, he was in church and he was looking around anxiously everywhere. And he said, "What's wrong, Jim?" His name was Jim. "Where is God?" He thought they were going to the house of God. Where is God? He was looking for God. He didn't have much hope of finding him. But when he saw an advertisement for the Swamiji, he thought, well, okay, let me check it out. And he was very attracted to Srila Prabhupada and his teachings. He had a degree in mechanical engineering and a San Francisco State Teachers College degree. But, and he was from a wealthy family. He was tall, handsome, strong, intelligent. He was all set up, the all-American boy, for a successful life. He was driving a taxi cab. When Karandar asked him why he was driving a taxi cab in San Francisco, when he could have been on a track to have a much more successful, prestigious life, he said, I didn't fit in with the upper class crowd. From the beginning, he didn't fit in with with that whole scene of trying to get yourself ahead materially. So he was the senior devotee by age, and by character and experience, he was mature. He was a rationally functioning human being, which that description wouldn't obviously fit many of those who were coming to the temple. I guess it was the same in New York, was it? When they came in the beginning. I asked, when I was new in the movement, I joined when I came in. I had short hair and regular clothes, and they were very suspicious of me because I wasn't a hippie. So I asked Mukunda, who was not Goswami at the time, I asked him, why do so many crazy people join this movement? And he told me, he said, it was a very good question. I asked Prabhupada that also. And Prabhupada said, you have to be a little crazy to join this movement. Don't take that too seriously. You're already all crazy enough. Isn't it? Psychologists, even people who look normal inside, pretty much everyone is. We're all crazy. That's what we're doing in this material world. Krishna Bhuli, forgetting Krishna. Sejiv Anadi Barimok. That's crazy to forget Krishna. So we're all here. Mukunda also, quoting Mukunda Prabhu about Jayananda Prabhu especially. He said from the very beginning, he was the most responsible and selfless person. You could never detect even the most subtle type of wish to satisfy his own personal needs. He had that unique attribute. Whatever needed to be done, he would do it. He was driving, in the beginning he joined the temple, but he was still driving his taxi cab. That was quite normal in those very early days because There was no money in the movement, and if anyone was employable among the hippies, some of them used to make money by selling illegal substances. But for anyone to have a regular, even to be able to hold down a job for more than 2 days, that was, or even to be employed, and people look at them, I want to employ them. Maybe picking strawberries in the season. So if anyone was employable, they were often, in the early days, they were sent out to be employed. That was Srila Prabhupada's policy, because how do you run a temple without money? You have to be practical. So he was driving a cab 15 hours a day, plus doing full sadhana and running the temple, 15 hours a day. And he would cover the expenses. And he was looking after, Mukunda Prabhu said, he was looking after 15 or 20 new brahmacharis. And Mukunda Prabhu at the time said, he shunned even the mere shadow of any semblance of position or praise or reward. He was completely free of personal ambition. Sometimes when we speak about departed devotees among Srila Prabhupada's disciples, there are some things we don't want to say, because it's not very appropriate when you're praising them to say certain things about them. But there's no such there's no sign of any such thing in Jayananda Prabhu's life. There's no one had anything. No one could detect anything inapt in his character. He became famous for his involvement. Well, he was famous before that, but Ratha Yatra. He understood that Srila Prabhupada was very fond of this Ratha Yatra festival, and he would get completely into it, planning the festival, personally building the carts. He would personally cook and distribute the prasad. And then he was always planning how to expand it so more temples could participate. In the beginning, Ratha Yatra, in the beginning of ISKCON in America, Ratha Yatra meant San Francisco. That was it. New Jagannath Puri. And it only gradually expanded to other places. When Jayananda Prabhu first joined Srila Prabhupada in 1967, he gave him his life savings, $5,000, which was a lot more in money value than it is now. Just gave it all to Srila Prabhupada, which Srila Prabhupada used. He was preparing books, but he didn't have any money to print them. So Srila Prabhupada used that for printing books. And then, just before he passed away, he was given money, maybe by his family, or for $5,000 for medical expenses. But he thought, what's the use? I'll give it to Srila Prabhupada and let me leave this body. Shortly before leaving, he said, when I leave my body, I want very much to come back to continue serving Srila Prabhupada in this world. Four days later, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter, 5th of May 1977. My dear Jayananda. He's writing a letter to someone who passed away. Seems very strange, but there's eternal communion. Srila Prabhupada wrote this letter and he had it published in Back to Godhead. My dear Jayananda, please accept my blessings. I am feeling very intensely your separation. In 1967, you joined me in San Francisco. You were driving my car. Jayananda would drive Srila Prabhupada. And chanting Hare Krishna. You were the first man to give me some contribution, $5,000 for printing my Bhagavad-gita. After that, you have rendered very favorable service to Krishna in different ways. I so hope at the time of your death, you were remembering Krishna, and as such you have been promoted to the eternal association of Krishna. If not, if you had any tinge of material desire, you have gone to the celestial kingdom to live with the demigods for many thousands of years and enjoy the most opulent life of material existence. From there you can promote yourself to the spiritual world. But even if one fails to promote himself to the spiritual world, at that time he comes down again on the surface of the globe and takes birth in a big family, like a yogi's or a brahmana's or an aristocratic family, where there is again chance of reviving Krishna consciousness. But as you are hearing Krishna Kirtan, I am sure that you were directly promoted to Krishna Loka. But he's saying, I want to join Prabhupada again. What's the difference? If you're with Srila Prabhupada, you're in the spiritual world. And then Srila Prabhupada quoted, Janma karma cha me divyam evang yo veti tatvataha tyaktva dehang punarajanma naiti mameti sojana. Krishna has done a great favor to you not to continue your diseased body and has given you a suitable place for your service. Thank you very much. That's thank you very much for your whole life. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Prior to this, several of Srila Prabhupada's disciples had passed away. He didn't write a letter like this to any other of them. Jayananda was special, no doubt. A few days later, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Rameshwara Prabhu, who was the BBT trustee, and I'm not sure exactly what maybe he was, anyway, he was a big shot over there in Los Angeles. And he wrote a letter to Rameshwara. Jayananda's death is glorious. It is very good that he had stated, what is the use of such a useless body? Better to give it up. He has left his body very wonderfully and he has been transferred to Vaikuntha. I have already sent a condolence letter for publication in Back to Godhead. Everyone should follow the example of Jayananda. I'm very proud that I had such a nice disciple. If possible, Jayananda's picture should be hung in the Ratha of Lord Jagannath, and in all of our temples a day may be set aside for holding a festival in his honor, just as we do on the disappearance day of other great Vaishnavas. So he was certified by Srila Prabhupada as a pure devotee, a seemingly ordinary American who perfected his life by always remaining ordinary in Krishna. What was extraordinary about him? What was extraordinary about him was that he was so ordinary, which we'll discuss. So ordinary, extraordinarily ordinary in his whole demeanor and in his whole approach to Krishna consciousness. And this demonstrates Srila Prabhupada's mercy and gives us all hope that you don't have to be extraordinary externally. Of course he was, but you wouldn't notice it at first. He gave extraordinary encouragement to so many devotees, so much so that Vishok Prabhu wrote this book about him, and then Vyaski Prabhu wasn't even thinking of, he was writing about him, but he just found so much that I have to write about him also. What did he do? Extraordinary things. Washing pots, taking out the garbage, getting the local businesses to donate bhoga, huge containers of milk and pallets of fruit, lots of sour cream. He organized Ratha Yatra, he built the carts, he engaged everyone, giving out prasad. He was a great fan of prasad and of prasad distribution. Even before he joined, he was a special person. He was saintly. His sister, after he passed away, recounted another anecdote that once he was on a beach in California And he sat there for several hours. There was an old dog with lots of ticks on it, and he sat there for about 3 hours just removing all the ticks one by one, taking mercy on some old dog. Dhanishta Dasi. I just selected some of them. You can all read that book, Jayananda Thakur and Radha Damodar Vilas. Her recollection that she was walking in downtown San Francisco in 1973, and she saw some devotees, about 8 devotees, chanting and dancing and playing the instruments. And who was leading the kirtan? She didn't know, but she saw a tall, strong man with his very face looked so kind and innocent and pure, and at the same time very intense, is very intensely chanting the holy names in great concentration. And he just opened his eyes, but most to see where he's, otherwise his eyes were closed, as really concentrating on the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And in those days, devotees didn't know more than 2 or 3 tunes, very simple tunes. So they'd sing the same tune over and over again. Japa also, he would become completely absorbed in chanting japa. He'd sit down and just chant, on and on, with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the holy names. He had great faith in the holy names of Krishna. And he applied himself to chanting both in kirtan and in japa. He worked, so he was famous for working so hard. And one anecdote, again, that was Karanda. He was there in San Francisco. They'd been out all day working hard together, doing things together before the Ratha Yatra. And the whole temple was completely packed because so many devotees had come from all over North America for the Ratha Yatra. So Karanda found a spot in some closet to lie down. And then Jayananda Jayananda didn't lie down. He went out, and Karanda said, well, what are you doing? Are you going to take rest? No, I'll come a little later. What's up? Well, I still have some rounds to chant. He was coming back at midnight and been working hard all day, but he didn't want to skip his rounds. And then he'd be up again early in the morning before anyone. There's so many things. Prasad, famous for prasad. He recounted that he felt guilty when he was first coming because he was so attracted to prasadam. He felt he was just going to eat. And Prabhupada personally took interest in him from the beginning, and he would always encourage him to take more and more prasad. There were so many hippies and devotees, but Prabhupada took an interest in him. And Prabhupada would put so many preparations on a big plate and serve him on and on. And he was a big man, could eat well, young man, but Prabhupada stuffed him. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada would cook specially for him also and feed him to make sure that he got prasad. And there was always a pot of halava kept in the temple. I don't know how they managed to keep a pot of halava in the temple that anyone could take, because it must have been a huge pot. They had to keep on cooking it. But he said this halava prasad was so potent and transcendental, he would come back from driving his cab all day, and it just lifted him up and made him feel Krishna conscious after working hard all day. And he kept on giving donations from his earnings as a cab driver. Often he would come in the morning and no one would be there. Devotees would be sleeping. Prabhupada would be there. Prabhupada would feed him. And in the evening, Prabhupada would either make sure was kept for him. Or if there was nothing, Prabhupada would personally cook for him. Later, Jayananda extended that same feeling of giving prasad. Everyone has to take prasad. He used to say, "This is Krishna prasad," and he'd say it in such a way that everyone would get the feeling of how he had such regard for prasad and such faith in the potency of prasad that he just wanted to share that with everyone. In the early days, there in San Francisco, devotees may not have known so much about all the rules and regulations. He would go out for collecting bhoga or selling incense. He would go out and he would, if there was nothing there in the temple, he would buy some cookies from the store and offer them. But he wanted to make sure everyone he met got some prasad. During the Sunday feast, Jayananda would help with serving prasad to all the guests, and he'd serve all the devotees. When everyone was completely full, he would sit down and peacefully, slowly relish taking Krishna prasad. Then he would lead the cleanup, personally going in the kitchen, cleaning all the pots, engaging others also. And if there's any prasad left over after all of that, he'd go out on the streets with all the devotees, whoever he could round up, they'd be chanting and giving out prasad. His regular schedule would be to cook in the morning for the Sankirtan devotees. That means they're going out and chanting and distributing back to Godheads. Then he'd serve it to them. Then he'd go out for driving his cab. Then late at night he'd come back, and guess what? The kitchen many times wouldn't have been cleaned. So after a whole day's work, he'd be cleaning the kitchen while everyone was asleep. Then he'd be up in the morning and same program. He worshipped prasad. When something spilled on the floor, he would get down and lick it up. That was not just him, but that was standards. Milk should never spill. If you spill milk, you have to lick it off. So it's prasadam. Can't waste prasadam. His impromptu feast when he was working on building the Ratha carts, he would go out and buy some bananas and buttermilk and offer it and give it to all those who are working. That was his favorite, because if there's nothing there, you have to keep the men busy, keep them full for working. Bananas and buttermilk. He was ready to do all kinds of services, and he was expert in cooking, in preaching, in deity worship, public relations. We never heard of public relations. I don't think I even heard the word public relations till about late 1970s, when Mukunda Maharaj and others introduced it. Otherwise, we maybe heard some, like these big companies, they're cheating people and they have public relations to try and make them look good. Spin doctors, they call them nowadays. Is it? Or maybe that term's out of date also. Anyway, his public relations was just being who he was, that's all. He would charm people naturally, without trying to psychologically manipulate them. Sankirtan, chanting, selling incense, construction, everything. Temple president in those days means you have to, nowadays also it means you have to see that everything's done. If no one else does it, you do it yourself. He was tireless. I think we already got that. We already understood that. He'd be outside the temple all the time, be outside getting flowers, making bhoga runs, taking out the garbage. I remember Dhanavir Maharaj told me when he first came to the temple, he saw First devotee he saw was Jayananda taking out the garbage. And he said, well, how come you're so happy? And I said, I don't know, I'm just, here, take a garbage can. He just immediately engaged him. Jayananda wasn't thinking, I'm being happy. He was just, for him it was just normal. He was fully engaged, and he'd engage others also. By inspiration, the people would like to be with him because he was so blissful in his service. You know, many times he'd miss class. He was out doing service. Like that garbage, boga run. Sometimes he would come into the class when Srila Prabhupada was giving it. He'd sit down, and within a few seconds he'd be asleep, which was not unusual in those days, but more expected of him because he hardly slept. And Srila Prabhupada would get angry with devotees when they fell asleep, but with Jayananda he didn't, because he knew he was just working so hard. And it wasn't due to disrespect to Srila Prabhupada, it's just that we all have a machine, we're living in a material body, and one of the things needed for maintenance is sleep, which is one of the things Jayananda didn't indulge in much. Here in Vishoka's book, it's not written that he would not criticize others. Vishoka didn't write that. What's written is that he could not criticize others. It just wasn't in his nature. Even if devotee did something criticizable, Jayananda would often say nothing, or he would point it out but make it say in such a way that it would seem that it's quite understandable that someone should do something. Whoever gave the class or led the kirtan, he would always appreciate it. Whatever prasad he took, he'd say, oh, that's the best prasad I ever took. He was very, very, very appreciative of devotees' efforts. He never spoke harsh words or chastised anyone. And if a devotee was criticizing someone else, Jayananda, he would just leave, that's all. He had what in modern New Age language we said he had a lot of positive energy, which inspired others. And that positive energy, he wanted to serve Srila Prabhupada and Krishna completely selflessly. And he inspired everyone else to do that. By everyone else, we're not just talking about the devotees in the temple, but even he would just someone on the street, he'd pull them out. How did he get the Ratha Yatra carts, the rat spilled? How did he do it? He would just call people off the street. He'd have one or two new devotees in those, again, they're usually at least somewhat crazy. And he'd be given all the people who no one else could engage, who were just so difficult to work with. And then he may call people off the street and just get them engaged here. And they would. But they were just, people immediately be inspired by Jayananda. Some of them might take a cigarette break while they were working, but he'd just go on working with them. In the temple, that service spirit was spontaneous. Jayananda led in that because he had that, and then everyone else also picked up on that. Not to the same extent that he did, but he diffused that spirit that we're all here to serve. A lot of his preaching wasn't by speaking per se, but it was just by being Krishna conscious. And others just wanted to be like him. One of the devotees, their recollection, Jayananda was our friend and our father and our mother. Srila Prabhupada was our eternal Gurudev, and Lord Jagannath was our most worshipful Lord. Jayananda loved everyone, man, woman, big devotee, little devotee. It made no difference to him. And naturally everyone loved him in return. As Srila Prabhupada once asked, how is it that everybody loves you? And Prabhupada said, because I love everyone. Natural. He personally relished Krishna consciousness. He was very happy in Krishna consciousness. And he wanted to make others happy in Krishna consciousness. He was completely convinced that no one can be happy except by Krishna consciousness. And he wanted to share that with others. He would often say things, share it with others by prasad, by the holy name, by service, talking about Krishna. He would often be saying things like, Krishna consciousness is so sweet. Whatever you do, just get a taste for the holy name. That will save you. Just like in the big bad world before he joined, he didn't care much for the upper crust of society. So in devotee society, he was very respectful of the leading devotees, and they were very respectful of him, but he didn't distinguish that small devotee, big devotee, new devotee, old devotee. He just saw everyone as his superior, even new devotees. And he would treat people as absolute newcomers. They didn't even know. They'd be building the Ratha. They had no idea what is Krishna consciousness, nothing. But he gave them a sense that this is what you should be doing. So he was expert in fanning even a little spark of interest into a fire of Krishna consciousness. But in his case, even people didn't have any interest. They didn't know what they were doing or why they were doing it, but they just felt so good to be with him that he would engage them. And that went for all kinds of people. He was dhira janaprayo, priyakaro. He was dear to the gentle and the ruffians. He'd go in the produce market and get people to donate things or give people a very cheap price. He made people want to serve Krishna. He induced that feeling in others. When a new bhakta would come, they were sent to Jayananda because he'd immediately make them feel that you're at home here, you're important, we want the best for you. And everyone felt happy to be with him. Again, Ratha Yatra, he would build it with cynics, bloopers, uncooperative personalities, non-devotees off the street. That was his team for building the Raths. He was always glorifying others for whatever good thing you do. He'd glorify them, and he was working harder than anyone else. And that inspired others. He was not a big Sanskrit scholar. He didn't know many verses. He was practical, down to earth. He was described as an ocean of service. He hadn't read all of Srila Prabhupada's books. We didn't have so many of those books in the days. When he was driving a cab, when he was asked to give a class, he'd often relate, well, I met this person in the cab, and he said that, and then relate it to Krishna consciousness. When Srila Prabhupada gave him Gayatri Mantra, then Srila Prabhupada spoke and asked him to repeat it, and Srila Prabhupada was just roaring with laughter because his pronunciation was so off. So you don't have to be an expert in pronouncing Sanskrit. It's a good thing to be pronouncing Sanskrit properly when we're glorifying Krishna, but Jayananda didn't. but he came to the conclusion of all Shastra. Yeah, he knew how to do so many things. Devotees would be driving out different places on Sankirtan. It would break down because they had all rickety, old vehicles. They'd call up Jayananda. Jayananda would go there, repair it personally, saving a lot of money, getting it done quickly, and then go back to his other services. Blissful, fun. Krishna consciousness is blissful and it's fun. He showed that. Whereas Maya, which is propagated, everything's wonderful in the land of Maya. Everything's great in America. About sex life, Jayananda once told Vishok Prabhu, it really isn't what it's cracked up to be. And Vishok made the comment that Jayananda was free of lust because he didn't have a selfish bone in his body. He was always working for the benefit of all living entities by assisting Srila Prabhupada in giving Krishna consciousness to the whole world. He was a transcendental miser. He didn't like to spend any money more than necessary. Even for some time he was married in Krishna consciousness, but he didn't have anything, hardly at all. As a senior devotee, he could have had nice clothes, this and that, but he would wear all old clothes. He'd get clothes from the thrift store, second-hand stores. He would prefer to, and that he would preach to people to give things free or discount. Otherwise, how could devotees with no money pull off a Ratha Yatra, huge festival? In the beginning days, they had no money. He'd personally collect the boga, the flowers, the lumber, sometimes by the system which was known as transcendental repossession. Translate that into English. Flowers, big blocks of wood sitting outside the lumber yard. Somehow or other, they'd be there in the evening and the owners would come back in the morning and somehow or other they wouldn't be there. Transcendental repossession. Not recommended in our present circumstances, but we can laugh about it now. And even when he got things, printing, advertising, and what he couldn't get for free, he'd get at a discount, and he'd make sure he got his money's worth. Putting the wrath cards together, he would work during the day and into the night. He would sleep at the site, because otherwise someone could come along, steal the tools, set the Ratha on fire, anything else. So he'd sleep at the site. And then he would rise every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, even if he'd been working up to midnight, go to the temple for Mangalarti, and come back and get to work. And then he would cook. He had a little gas stove and he would cook. And he kept his team enlivened because everything he cooked, even if it was very simple, it was just like nectar from the spiritual world. And the devotees from the temple would sometimes sneak out to the Rat site to get some of that prasadam. Every time there were 3 days to go and still there's 3 weeks work to do. 3 hours to go and there's still 3 days work to do. But somehow or other, just at the last minute, everything would come together. And then after the festival was over, Jayananda would oversee the cleaning up the park where the festival had been. And in the days that followed, he would bring prasadam, a big cake or a pie, to the people who had donated. the people who knew they'd donated. And getting permission from the authorities to do, he would bring them all prasadam, and they all loved him. To know him is to love him. Even there was one young boy, 7 years old, Jayananda, he was looking what's going on, and Prabhupada preached to him about Krishna, gave him the name Parameshwar, and this little boy painted one of the wheels on the Ratha. And even the cops in San Francisco, they respected Jayananda so much that if they weren't posted on duty on that day, they would, if they had a day off, they'd bring their whole family to the Ratha Yatra to be there with you. Yeah. You've seen in New York how the Ratha Yatra, how the cops, they're very respectful to it. I think that goes back to the days of Jayananda. What do you think, Vishugada Prabhu? Some connection there? Yeah. Many people, he'd say, we're organizing a festival, they'd have rental tools, he'd get them to give it free of charge, and then he'd tell them, come to the festival, and they would, because of what ordinary people would come to a Hare Krishna festival. It was something anathema to them, but they came because of Jayananda. There was a commissioner in the city who was always giving the devotees a hard time. But one time there was one to see, and she asked about Jayananda. She was really heavy on the devotees. And then when she was told he passed away, she started crying. She was so tough. And then Vishok Prabhu said he was preparing for Ratha Yatra after Jayananda's passing away. He went to a store to buy something, some part. And they asked about Jayananda, he said, oh, he passed away. And all the employees in the store, they all started crying. And they gave the part free in commemoration of him. What a personality, huh? Ordinary, building the Ratha, giving prasadam. Where are the photos of him with Srila Prabhupada? He was an early joiner. We don't see them because he didn't hang around Srila Prabhupada. He felt a little shy. Awe and reverence. He thought, better I serve Prabhupada. So I'd be out somewhere serving Prabhupada. He felt embarrassed to be in his presence and stay in the background. Now, not all pure devotees have to be like him. If everyone thought, well, I shouldn't be with Prabhupada, then how could he have given instructions for? And Jayananda Prabhu kept a very low-key profile, but someone has to take leadership roles, and when you're in leadership role, you have to be like that. So it's not that all pure devotees have to be like him exactly, but everyone can learn from him. What are the qualities of a Vaishnava that Srila Prabhupada appreciated so much? Some devotees who gave their memories for this book that Vishoka compiled, a little bit of cynicism. You see, he wasn't sitting on a big seat and he wasn't telling people what to do like that. But again, it's not that every devotee has to be like him. It's Sankirtan movement, we need, for any movement, you need all different kinds of people. Varnashram is based on that. Varnashram, all different kinds of people to cooperate and serve in so many ways. But we can learn from Jayananda so many things. Personification of Trinadapi Sunitena. Very humble, very tolerant, very detached from this world, always ready to give respect to others, not desiring respect for himself, and always blissfully absorbed in the holy names of Krishna. His service mood, his humility, his faith in the holy names, his desire that others could avail the gifts of Krishna consciousness. The first Ratha Yatra in New York City was, again, Jayananda was very much behind it. Even though he was so sick at the time, he was working so hard, even though his body was racked with pain and weak, but somehow he was working so hard. And though he hadn't slept the night before, getting things together, he was completely sick, but he drove the Rath down Fifth Avenue, which was a great victory for Srila Prabhupada, because 10 years before he'd come to New York City with no friends, no money, nothing. And now he had this was a victory parade for Srila Prabhupada. And that Jayananda was so happy. And he said that, Jayananda said that people see Jagannath with his big smile, and they start smiling. And you can understand from their smile that I'm elaborating a little bit. They get pain in their mouth because they never used those muscles for the last 50 years. They never smiled. But Jagannath he said that Jagannath makes them smile. But that's the bliss of Jayananda also. He'd people who have no hope in this world, no hope in their heart, no love, nothing, but it's there underneath. And he would communicate to soul. So we have so many things to learn from him. His love for, his faith in prasadam, and again, he wanted to share that service attitude. Certified saint, certified by Srila Prabhupada as a great Vaishnava. So, Hare Krishna. You must have been there in 76 for the Ratha Yatra. Do you want to tell us something of your memories of Jayananda from that time? Give a mic. Vishnu Gada Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Brigupati was there.
Yes.
And Mataji Jambavati, she must have been there, I guess. Several. Okay. Okay, let's hear some more. Okay, you got the mic. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Bhakti Vikasa Maharaj. So when Jayananda came to do the Ratha, just to elaborate on what you were saying, in the temple, everybody was engaged already. So there was had no set crew at all to make the Ratha. And Jayananda came, he got all the devotees, people off the street, just as Maharaj was saying. And some of the people were like ruffians, I said, and some were bikers. One of my good friends is a devotee. He was a biker, the bike gang. And he came and Jayananda engaged him, and now he became a devotee for 50 years after that. You know Chaitanya Jivan?
Chaitanya Jivan!
Yes. You didn't know that? Yeah, he became a devotee because of Jayananda.
Really?
Yes.
Is he still there in Philly?
No, he passed away.
He passed away? I didn't even know.
Yeah. So Chaitanya Jivan. And because at that time I was in charge of the devotee, cooking for the devotees.
I can imagine Chaitanya Jivan was a pretty rough kind of character prior. Later he became a gentle giant.
Yes. And so I was in charge of the kitchen when Jayananda Prabhu came for making the Ratha. And so he was so happy to get the prasadam, as you were talking about. He would, he would be working all day at the Ratha cart to do it, and then he would come with his people to wash the pots in the evening time for the kitchen people. Even though we were there, he would insist, not that we would also wash, but he would insist to come and wash the pots with his people from the Ratha cart.
Even there was someone else to do it.
Yes, that was his thing. And he would thank me 100 times whatever prasadam he got. It was like, it was so excited and so enthusiastic to get, because of that prasadam, whatever it was. It was amazing. And just a couple other things. One thing was, as you mentioned, Jayananda Prabhu was a tall, handsome, strapping young American man. He was very attractive. And sometimes I would see that the ladies would kind of be hitting on him. Naturally, right? Naturally. And I was just shocked because it was like he was completely oblivious to it. Completely, which is...
He didn't even
amazing.
notice it.
Yeah, it was amazing. I thought it was amazing. This is a liberated person. I could see that. So, and
no, he was avoiding it. He didn't even notice it.
Yeah, he didn't notice. It was just, they were there. He didn't, they were doing. He was just not even having any thought that was going on. It was just a
childlike innocence.
Yes. And as you mentioned, that the Prabhupada, the Ratha Yatra down Fifth Avenue was a victory parade for Srila Prabhupada, and you can see Srila Prabhupada would come to the Rath site and inspect before the Ratha Yatra. He came several days before the parade, and he would inspect the carts because they were being built on the west side, right by the river.
Donald Trump's site.
Yeah, he had just purchased that area. So and Prabhupada came and he was very pleased with the wheels of the Rath, because before they were using mostly wooden wheels, and one time they cracked before, and not in New York. 1976 was the first Ratha Yatra in New York, big Ratha Yatra. I was a devotee since 1971, and I heard about Ratha Yatra. I had no idea what it was. Vishnu Jan Swami came in 1972, and he said, "Let's have Ratha Yatra." and we went to what's that park in Brooklyn? Prospect Park, and we carried a little palanquin with the small Jagannath deities, and and we had kirtan. We distributed prasadam. It was like nothing. I thought, well, that's Ratha Yatra. That's nothing. But in 1976, it was a huge, incredible event, and there's a picture on the front of Back to Godhead magazine of Jayananda in the beginning.
Right.
Yes.
On the cover of Back to Godhead.
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. And my godbrother Maheshwar tells the story. It's on.
Right, he's a great Rath builder also.
Yes, he tells the story of the 76 Ratha Yatra. You can find it on Dandavats.com.
Right,
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That just the day before the Ratha Yatra, there was a huge windstorm, and it destroyed one of the canopies for one of the carts. And at the last minute, and they were thinking, we have to give up one cart, because they had 3 carts. We have to give up one cart. But then no. Devotees rallied by Jayananda and Maheshwar. Devotees came from the temple, and all night they worked, and they got the 3rd cart back, even though it was thought to be impossible. Jayananda Prabhu ki jai.
Jai!
Hare Krishna.
So, it's our culture to glorify devotees. So somebody might think, you guys, this is what you guys do. You just, and you exaggerate. But I had an experience 10 years ago on traveling Sankirtan, which enabled me to understand that no, whatever I was hearing about Jayananda was not exaggeration. It was not hype. And this is how it went. I was on traveling Sankirtan. I had 3 new boys with me, and it was the morning, and we were, doing our program. We're chanting japa at that point. So I was in a parking lot of a supermarket parking lot, and I was chanting about 50 feet away from the van or so, and maybe 100 yards away from the front of the supermarket. So I'm standing there chanting, and some guy comes walking towards me, and I go, oh, here we go, And he was older, a little older than me, looked like, and he wasn't dressed well or anything like that. And he's coming towards me, and he's with like a funny face, and he's looking at me, and then he gets about like as close as we are to each other, and he goes, you are. I said, well, what? I said, I am what? He said, you are chanting japa. I said, well, yeah. I said, how do you know about that? And then, by this time he's right up on me. And I said, well, I lived in a temple for about 6 months back in the early 70s. I said, really? I said, which? He said, Berkeley. And I said, well, what do you remember? He said, well, and he was just like, Jayananda. he said, Jayananda, he led the chanting. He led the he was our leader. He was our inspiration. He used to cook for everybody, and then he'd feed us, and he wouldn't eat until after he fed everybody. And then he would clean up, and then he would take us all out on Hari Nam. And, and other things like that. And I just, okay, his name was Steve. I asked him what his name was. I said, okay, Steve, look, hang on. Just do me a favor. Just come over here with me, because I wanted the boys to hear this. I said, come over to the van with me, and I just want you to say the exact same thing so that these fellows could hear it. So I brought him over to the van, and we sat him in the front passenger seat. And I said, okay, Steve, go ahead. And he started telling the same things again. So Jayananda was our hero. He inspired everybody. He used to cook and clean and take us out on Sankirtan. I mean, he did everything, And at some point, he just, as he was describing all this, he couldn't talk anymore. He became overwhelmed by emotion. And he just started sobbing, crying, basically. And he just stopped talking. And he felt like a little embarrassed and everything. And he couldn't talk. And so he just got up and, put his head down, got up and walked off. And we just respect, we were quiet. We just respected that. And that was that. But it was like, all of us were just looking at each other like, wow. Because, this was like, for him, it would have been 45 years later. So here's this person, 45 years after that, that association, when he started remembering Jayananda, he got overwhelmed by emotion. And he walked off. And then we just talked about it a little bit among ourselves. And then I went back out to chant, and the same spot. And then he comes from another direction, because he walked off, the other direction, and he comes back, and he's real quiet, and he's walking up to me, and then he goes like this, and he handed me this little pendant with a picture of Radha and Krishna on it, and he was still kind of overwhelmed by emotion. He just handed me that, and looked like that, and walked off again. But that was amazing, 45 years after having the association, he was still really affected. And while he was remembering Jayananda, he became overwhelmed by emotion.
Did you give him prasadam?
Huh?
Did you give him prasadam?
Yeah, we gave him some prasadam.
That's Jayananda.
Yeah. And I had one little personal association with Jayananda. In the beginning of 1977, I was working in a legal office with a devotee named Varatapo. He was trying to open up state fairs. And in the next room, Jayananda was, there. And so I would finish up around 12, and then I was supposed to go out on Sankirtan. So before I went out, when I finished up in the office, I'd go right into his room and say, Prabhu, is there anything I could do, to help you? Anything you need, anything I can get for you? And, no, Prabhu. No, I'm fine. Just come on. What's your service? Go ahead on Sankirtan. It was very difficult to serve him. It was. I mean, you couldn't unless you wanted to be tricky about the whole thing. He just turned the tables. I don't need to. You should go out there and do your service. You have an important service to do. I'm fine here. Like that. I was impressed by his humility and just like that. So that was my experience.
Apurva Prabhu?
Yeah. I remember the instance very clearly because I had a conversation with Keshava Bharati Prabhu, who was with Jayananda when he was in the hospital, and they found out that he had leukemia. After one night in the hospital, he just unplugged all the whatever they had on him, and with Keshava Bharati, who was visiting him, just walked out of the hospital, even though he was in great pain. And that whole time that he was taking the Ratha Yatra cart, his body was raking with pain and suffering. And he just transcended all of it. And another instance that I remember, his complete obliviousness of the bodily platform. Just in 1976, shortly after I got married to Kamalini, they sent all of the women's Sankirtan devotees to Puerto Rico with Lakshmi and Shrinya, most of them. But there were still about 6 or 8 lady Sankirtan devotees. And myself and Jayananda were put in charge of taking care of the Matajis and making sure their prasadam was there and giving them their spots. And he was, I can still remember, in the morning he would go down to the kitchen and prep up a salad and another preparation to send out the ladies on Sankirtan. And he was completely transcendental to all bodily platforms. And I think today we should also talk about the actual day that he disappeared, that he left his body in New Dwarka. But also Kamalini had some personal experiences with Jayananda and some realizations. So at some point. But I happened to be in LA when he left, but I don't remember the exact details of how the garland came from, Oh, you weren't there? Well, just before he was staying actually in a room that was in that parking lot where the Rath carts were being built, and he was getting ready to leave. And right after, all the devotees would go over every day and, check on him and get his association. But he left his body just shortly after Mangalarti, and some devotee was transcendentally inspired to bring the garland from Rukmini Dwarkadish right over to where he was staying, which was very close. And she put the garland, or he put the garland on Jayananda, and at that point he left his body. So that was amazing. It was exactly like maybe 5 or 10 minutes after Mangalarti, at a very transcendental time, he left. And there's also a wonderful story, I don't know it very clearly, but he was giving a talk. This was maybe a few months before he left, and Kamalini knows it a little better about how he had a cake made, or they did. Devotees made a cake of a Rath Yatra cart and present. And he had that cake, and he was giving a presentation to all the devotees, and then he distributed the cake. But he was always like completely transcendental and totally absorbed in serving Srila Prabhupada's mission. And it's really amazing. His dedication and devotion and love for Ratha Yatra, Srila Prabhupada, and unending devotional service. Even every ounce of his body he would serve in some capacity. When he was the temple president of San Francisco, even when he would go to sleep, he laid his body down in front of because the temple was in a very rough neighborhood, but even his sleeping, he was acting as the guard to prevent ruffians from coming in the temple. Yeah. So, Jai.
Then. Divyang Prabhu, anything?
I met Jayananda in San Francisco. We were on travel in Sankirtan, and Prabhupada was going to be at that Ratha Yatra. And Mrigendra had told us about him, this wonderful devotee, Jayananda. He's amazing. And then when I saw him, he was wearing bib overalls, like a farmer wears, jeans that go all over. And he was like dirty. He was out in the back underneath a van, fixing a van. And we were all in the temple and everything, and Mrigendra goes, "That's Jayananda. And he comes out from under the van. And he's got grease all over his hands. And he's like, Haribo Prabhu. He was just always blissful. And like everybody said, he was always busy. He was so busy, you couldn't see him around the temple because he was always working, doing stuff. And I just went up and met him. That's all I got. But it's amazing. Thanks for sharing all those details because I haven't read that book. And it's heart-rending to remember how sweet and
that's only a sample.
That's just a little, I
Yeah.
gotta get the book. Haribo. Jayananda ki jai.
Vishvato Mukha Prabhu.
This is a story about Jayananda. I'm sure didn't make it in the book. This was early 1976. I was traveling with one of the Radha Damodar buses, and Jayananda came out and joined us for a short time, a week or two. This must have been just before we went to New York to build the Rath carts. But the mood in that party at that time was a little grim. At least my mood was a little grim. I found I was kind of struggling, working the lots every day. And when Jayananda came, at first I couldn't really believe he was for real because he was just so blissful and upbeat. He told this crazy. He would go out and distribute in the lots with us, and he came back and he told this crazy story about his approach. That what he would tell people. We were selling incense at the time. We'd sell him a pack of incense, give it back to Godhead. So he said he would tell people, "Yeah, my wife makes this incense at home in the bathtub with camel dung." And it was such a crazy story. I mean, it just was so silly. We just all cracking up. Really, really lightened the mood. That's all. Hare Krishna.
That yellow jacket that you see Jayananda wearing with his hand up like this in New York City, that's in Mayapur at the Jagannath Pur. They have it there in glass. So one devotee, I guess, just brought it over there to Mayapur. So that's where that is. If anyone goes there, they can see his jacket. And there was two things. Same thing. I was with the Vishnu John's bus. We pull up in San Francisco on Valencia Street. It was a rough neighborhood. And when we pull up, there was a car right in the driveway right there, and we're right next to the curb. And these two long legs are sticking out. And I said, "Well, who's under the car?" They said, "Oh, that's Jayananda." And I thought, "Oh, God, that's Kali Yuga working on cars? That's Maya." Oh. I thought it was Maya because I said, what brahmachari wants to work on a car? And then another time, some years later, when there was the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan party, they were also in San Francisco, and they were serving out, Jayananda was serving out the drink, the nectar drink, the famous Radha Damodar nectar drink, with buttermilk, of course a lot of sugar, and then all the frozen different types of fruit. And so he was serving it out, and I was kind of frivolous because I was young and stupid. So I said, "Hey, Jayananda, what's going on?" And I was coming up to get my drink, and he looks at me with serious eyes, and I go like, "Whoa, I better get serious." Jayananda ki.
Jai.
Jai, Hare Krishna. So one personal story, in New York, every Saturday we had a huge Harinam, like 300 devotees at Times Square. So it happened to be Halloween one Saturday, but two other brahmacharis, I was brahmacharini and me, we decided, let's dress up like Krishna and Balaram and Ram, because we had the players there, Vaikuntha players, they let us borrow their costumes, and we'll just distribute books on the Lower East Side. And so we were getting ready to go, and Jayananda happened to be there in the foyer. He said, "Where are you going?" oh, it's rough out there downtown. You shouldn't go by yourself, so I'll take you. We were going to just take the subway and all. And so he said, hold on, I'll get the keys to the van. And he personally drove us out and just kind of, wait, as if we moved to the next block, he would just follow. So he was like that, very, fatherly and protective. And like was mentioned, like he was like a real brahmachari. You never sensed that he was attracted to women at all. And, because women can tell, believe it or not. But, another thing about the disappearance, he was living across the street from the parking lot before he left, and it was his birthday, and he never wanted to be glorified or acknowledged. So they knew if they said, we have a little birthday celebration for you, he wouldn't come. So at this stage, he was already in a wheelchair. And so they said, Jayananda, there's something with the cart. One of the mechanical apparatus is not working, and you're the only one who knows how to fix it. So we need you to come over and tell us how to do it, even though he's already on his deathbed and he's in a wheelchair. And he said, okay. So he came over they brought him to the parking lot, and there was the big Ratha Yatra cake, and so it was a big surprise. And then he cut up the cake and distributed it to everyone, and there's one piece left, and he was gonna honor it, but one little boy came up, a neighbor boy, and he said, and he gave his last piece to him. So he didn't even get any of the birthday cake. And when he left, it was right before Mangalarti. The devotee came with big Lord Jagannath's garland and put it on him. Then the conch shells blew and he left just at that time. But about his leukemia, like he was in the Manhattan Temple, and one night he was walking to the bathroom, very late at night, and he was holding his stomach like bent over, and Keshava Bharati happened to be, I guess he was Maharaj, and he saw him. He said, what's the matter? Oh, nothing. No, really, I saw you. What's the matter? Why are you holding your stomach? And then he said, I don't know what's the matter, but he picked up his shirt. He had all these sores on his body and all over his legs. And he said, you need to go to a doctor. He said, listen, it's going to be Ratha Yatra soon. I'll go to the doctor after Ratha Yatra, as long as you don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody that I'm in pain and that I have these sores all over my body. And he said, okay, so right after Ratha Yatra, we probably still wouldn't have gone, but Keshava Bharati said, okay, you promised you would go, so let's go. And that's when they diagnosed him and said, it's too far gone, there's nothing you can do for treatment, so you'll be dying pretty soon. And that's when he got the $5,000 health insurance that his parents had taken out for him, which he gave to Prabhupada. Google says that now $5,000 is worth $30,000. But anyway, like always doing cleaning, garbage mechanic. So his clothes were all greasy, and the devotees told him in San Francisco, this is not good image, PR. You need to get some clothes that aren't all greasy and have holes in them. And they said, just go to the Salvation Army and get something, nice looking. So, all right, so he went, and, it was probably $1 for a pair of pants and $1 for a shirt. So he got them, and he went in the dressing room, but he didn't want to pay. So he just put his old clothes over the new clothes. But on the way out, he got detected because his clothes had so many holes they could see the other clothes underneath. So they called the police, and he actually got arrested for shoplifting, and he actually went to court. And then in court, he started crying to the judge. He said, you know, my whole life is dedicated to God and everything. I only use all money for God's service, and I just couldn't bear to spend any money just for myself. And he was crying, and the judge started crying. and the judge just said, dismissed. And the policeman who arrested him, he said, I'll pay for the clothes, so to let him go. But like that, like we mentioned, so very thrifty. And also, like how he could engage people. You may have heard he's building the cart in San Francisco, and one man's just walking on the street, and he's there, hey, can you hold this nail for me just for a minute so I can hammer it in? So the man says, sure. And he holds it, and then he said, here, can you hammer this one in? And then he's there, wow, are you a carpenter? No, I've never done this before in my life. Wow, I thought you were a carpenter. You are so good at this. Do you think you could do some more, do a few more nails? And then he spent the whole day helping to build the cart like that. So we know, just how he always wanted to engage people. And by the way, I do have that book at my book table. Second of all, if you look at the first page of the book, Vishok said, I wrote this book because Purva Prabhu kept asking me to write a book about Jayananda. So that's why he wrote it. So all glories to Jayananda Prabhu.
I don't know Jayananda personally, but one year, I'm not very good at timelines, but I remember one time I drove up to San Francisco from Los Angeles, and it was for not for Ratha Yatra, it was for a Lord Chaitanya festival we used to have. And there was some big Vyasa or something that was being constructed, and anybody who came in was immediately engaged in service, helping to create this beautiful Vyasa. So I got to sort of meet Jayananda in that way, because he was the one who was engaging everyone. But my husband used to tell, my husband Haripad Das used to spend time with Jayananda. And one of his favorite pastimes that he shared was that Jayananda would always make sure that everybody had something to eat. And one of his favorite preps to offer and distribute was dates and sour cream. Dates and sour cream, meal after meal, day after day. And my husband got intoxicated, but he also got very attached to eating dates and sour cream. So he remembered fondly. And another thing that he shared was that when Jayananda Prabhu would give class, which very rarely happened because he was usually under a car or out collecting boga. But one time he remembered Jayananda was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, and he fell asleep while he was speaking. Hare Krishna.
Then Jambavati Mataji, nothing. You didn't meet him. Okay. Oh, so Jayananda Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Joy.